City Manager. Do the roll call, please.
Mayor Stackfleth.
Here.
Councilperson Redmond.
Here.
Councilperson Collings.
Here.
Councilperson Clure is joined.
Here.
There we go.
And Councilperson Stearns is absent.
All right, very good. So we have a special presentation tonight from Pace Engineering to give us a thorough update on the wastewater treatment plant just finished with construction a few months ago. Gentlemen.
Good evening, council members. Thanks for having us. Good to see you guys. It's been a while since I've attended a meeting. I'm here tonight with Grant Maxwell as well. So got a little presentation put together for you to kind of go through a little bit of timeline for the benefit of some of the council members that weren't here in the beginning, and then kind of go into where we're at on the treatment plant and some of the challenges that we're facing. So we'll get started here. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the timeline, but just to kind of give people an order of magnitude, regulations for copper and zinc were imposed in 2007, and then in 2012, the ammonia limits were imposed. In 2013, we started the feasibility study work. In 2014, we completed that feasibility study work, and then in May 2018, the city secured funding for the project that consisted of just about 11 million in grant and about 13 million in loan. So continuing with the timeline, the project was bid in September 2019, and it came in about 19.7 million, which was a little more than the budget at that time. And so the state required the city to go back and apply for more funding, and in the meantime, the city needed to adjust its sewer rates. So in December 2020, we rebid the project. It came in just a little bit more than it was in 2019, started construction in May 2021, and in January 24 reached substantial completion just about a year ago. And since startup, we've struggled a little bit meeting requirements for zinc, and so that's the kind of the genesis of our presentation here tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the design assumptions that went into that, what we think's happening, possibilities that might be happening, and potential steps forward to try to mitigate that. So the basis of the original design, the old city wastewater treatment plant removed metals by removing total suspended solids. And so in wastewater, we have solids that settle and then solids that don't. And we can remove about 80% of them just with clarification, just with settling. But there's a small fraction that remains in suspension, and those we refer to as total suspended solids, or TSS. The city's old plant had its dissolved air flotation thickener process and filtration process that removed that TSS before discharge. So during design and when we were doing the feasibility study work, we were able to draw a really strong correlation between removal of total suspended solids and metals removal. So this particular slide here shows that relationship, and it's a timeline across the bottom that starts in January 2012 and goes all the way across to December 2012. And what you see is the green line represents the total suspended solids in the city's effluent. You can see it's fairly erratic. Anything above this black dashed line exceeds the discharge limits that you're imposed by the state. So it doesn't show real well on the graph, but in about late April, the city began running its DAF system to remove total suspended solids, and you can see that in the effluent, those solids started to drop pretty good, as well as the associated zinc tied to those solids. And then in July, mid-July of that year, the city added the filtration process to the DAF, and it removed total suspended solids even more, generally below about 5 parts per million here. And then zinc was quite a bit less than the discharge requirement, which at that time was about 13 parts per billion. So essentially, based on, we thought this was a pretty good data set. We felt that if we remove total suspended solids from the wastewater stream, we could remove enough of the insoluble fraction of zinc to comply with discharge limits. And so this next slide shows a similar relationship with copper. And so the curves look very similar. You still have your TSS numbers here. Effluent copper is the red line. And again, we had a very strong correlation that by removing TSS, we could remove the metals fractions. So, question now is, what's going on? Why is the plant not removing zinc? So, some possibilities are, and these are just possibilities, but the influent flows at the treatment plant have dropped substantially since we really started working on the design of the project. If you look at this graph, you can see I'm going to try a different pointer here. That's not sure.
Paul wants to ask a question right now.
Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
Is inflow and infiltration with the new sewer lines going in, has inflow and infiltration reduced, which is why inflows into the sewer plant have declined so much?
Yes, and you'll see that from this graph relationship.
Okay,
So it doesn't look like, oh, there it is. Okay. So the blue line here, well, you see the blue line on the graph, that's the influent flow into the plant. So that's coming into your headworks. The upper dashed dot line is the design rate that we based the new plant on, and it's 0.67 million gallons per day, or about 670,000 gallons a day. And so we based that on the city's actual influent from 2004 to about 2013, and you can see we just kind of split the baby through that blue line to come up with the 0.67. So as you move across the timeline, in 2015, the city added water meters. And usually when communities add water meters, they go from a flat rate structure to water meters, you expect somewhat of a reduction in water use. And you kind of see that as the blue line starts to tail down to the right around 2015. But the other thing that happened then is it was kind of the beginning of this last major drought, going into this last drought, right? And so you see the water or the incoming flows continuing to drop as you go from left to right. And I think that drop is probably more related to drought conditions, but it could be the water meters played into that. So as you continue to go even further across the graph, we did a collection system improvement project in about 1920. That we didn't, at least the data doesn't show we had much of a reduction in influent flow, even though we were replacing old sewers. So continuing to move across, in 2022, we started the interceptor replacement project. And we found some gully washer leakers on that project. And you can see that blue line here drops precipitously down to right now, the average influent flows are about 0.18 or about 180,000 gallons. So the flows went from an average of 0.67 in 2012 to 0.18.
it went down 500,000 gallons?
That's what the data suggests. And when we did the interceptor project, we built a new line under I-5 across in front of CHP there. On the east side of the freeway on Spring Street, we found a pipeline that had an 8-inch clay line coming into it that was running full of clear water that was serving no one. So we eliminated that, of course. And I mean, you can imagine a full 6-inch pipe of clear groundwater flowing into your sewer. And there were other, leaks going across the wetlands, going across Cold Creek and such. But anyway, you see that drop. So it's a 372% drop from our design flow rate to the current. That's based on a dry weather condition. So, when we look at wastewater plants and especially designing the biological portions, we look at dry weather flow because that's your greatest concentration of organics. But you still have I&I in the system, and we saw that in the storm we got around Thanksgiving, where you guys got hammered up here in the last snow. The flows, went up. But the reason this is critical is that the dry weather flows have gone down so much. And so when you think about wastewater, all of the constituents you're trying to meet in your permit are based on dilution. It's always a mass divided by volume, milligrams divided by liters. And so obviously the more liters you have in there, the smaller that concentration is, the greater chance of complying. In this case, like you said, we took out 500,000 gallons a day, so now that volume is much less, but the mass of zinc is still coming in.
May I?
It's good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I understand what you said. Wouldn't the ratios of total dissolved solids to volume of water stay roughly the same no matter what total flows, whether down at 180,000 or 670,000? Wouldn't those total dissolved solids, and then consequently the zinc and copper coming out of them in removal, wouldn't that stay roughly the same?
It doesn't seem to be for zinc. For copper, we're getting good removal with copper, and I have some slides here that kind of show some of those relationships as we go on.
Okay, I'll be quiet and let you finish.
No, it's okay. Questions are great. So that's, one possibility is that with such a drop in flow and having a greater concentration of zinc coming in, the plant is not able to handle that. So another possibility too that we're looking into is, this plant was designed to remove nitrogen, and a substantial cost of the project was to remove nitrogen, which is to reduce ammonia effectively to meet that discharge requirement. And through the nitrification process, what happens is that process consumes alkalinity in the water and drives pH down. And then when you go into denitrification, which is the second step of removing nitrogen, you get a little bit of that alkalinity back, but not as much as you took during the nitrification process. So by having a high level of nitrogen removal, it could be that the depressed alkalinity is causing more zinc to go insoluble, as opposed to staying insoluble and being removed with the solids. And so one of the approaches for removing zinc and copper and other metals in wastewater is to raise pH to make it insoluble so that it'll either settle out or you can filter it out, right? So we're thinking that could be a potential here. Another possibility is just different discharges of zinc within the collection system. That's a hard one to track. I'm not aware of any major industrial users that's come on in the city of Mount Shasta, but you never know what gets dumped down the drain. So back to your point, Jeffrey, on kind of the fraction of insoluble versus soluble fraction of copper and zinc, we did do several rounds of testing to test the zinc concentration and copper at multiple locations in the process, from the headworks all the way to effluent, and test the percentage of insoluble versus soluble zinc at every step along the way. So this graph is a relationship that shows copper, and it's working, really well. The blue portion of the graph is the dissolved copper. The green portion is insoluble, and as you see it going through the influent and then in the grit chamber and the clarifier, it's dropping both the insoluble and soluble fractions down to below your effluent limit, which is that dashed dot line towards the bottom. And then as you get you run into filtration, you can see that it removes almost all of the insoluble fraction. Just that little green line above is all the insoluble left. The rest of it is dissolved. So copper seems to be working. Zinc, on the other hand, we see a drop as we get through the grit chamber, but once it gets into the biological process, we're removing the insoluble fraction, but the dissolved fraction is going up, and that's why we're speculating that maybe the pH from the nitrogen removal could be causing more zinc to go into solution. That's something that we have to look into. Obviously something we didn't expect. But it's an interesting relationship because you saw from the graphs I showed before from your previous plant that both copper and zinc acted the same. But the old plant wasn't removing nitrogen like this new plant is. So just kind of informational. So, question, why weren't these possibilities accounted for in the design? I know that question's going to be asked, so I'm going to beat you to the punch. I guess number one, biological treatment plants remove biological constituents, not metals. Metals are typically removed through an industrial waste treatment process. And like I say, it's usually done by adjusting pH, allowing precipitates to either settle out or be filtered out, and then dropping the pH back down to an acceptable level. So biological treatment plants in and of themselves do not remove the dissolved portion of metals. Kind of made that point already. The industrial processes would include a metal precipitation or metal chelation process. It would be an additional process onto your plant, and the capital cost would probably be $6 to $10 million bucks, and you'd have several $100,000 a year of chemical costs to do that. And you guys are around. I know Jeffrey and John back, trying to get funding and going through all the value engineering and justifying to the state that we needed all this infrastructure to do what we were going to do. I don't think we would have gotten the state to agree to fund the $6 to $10 million project, and it would have all been loan funded. Because if you guys recall, we maximized all the grant you guys could get at that time. So it would have been a $6 to $10 million capital investment on the ratepayers. And we thought there was strong enough correlation between TSS and metals removal from the old plant that we wouldn't need to consider that. So also looking, as we kind of made the point before, that we're looking into how that substantial drop in flow is impacting our ability to remove zinc. So what is being done moving forward? We don't have all the answers tonight. We're just kind of updating you guys on what we know. But PACE staff, Grant and I, as well as Todd, Ken, and Brooke met with regional board staff last week to kind of present, hey, this is where we're at on this thing. We need some help here. What are we going to do here? And the regional board acknowledged that, a substantial drop in flow is a big deal, and that flow factors into the discharge limits. And so they're willing to kind of go back and look at the math and see if they can manipulate and basically reconsider the discharge limits to see if they can be increased. Another point that they made that I think would be beneficial too is they could issue a city a time schedule order, which basically the advantage of that for the city is that it essentially stops the bleeding on the regulatory mandatory minimum penalties now and establishes a time frame to try to figure this out. So none of this is set in stone, but those were discussed last week, and we'll continue to maintain those lines of communication with the regional board. The city has already started, and we've been helping with adding different additives to the biological treatment process to try to get something to grab onto that soluble fraction of zinc, and we're having limited success with that. Also considering experimenting with just increasing pH, adding alkalinity to the front of the plant to try to make up for the alkalinity that's being consumed in the nitrogen removal. Add alkalinity so that it doesn't give that zinc an opportunity to go back into solution. So that's something that we want to look into as well. We're working with the Cottonwood wastewater treatment plant down south of Reading with a similar situation, and they're showing some success with it. So it's a possibility. And then, of course, depending on what we get from the regional board, any or all of the following could be implemented or considered. I could seek clean water SRF grant funding to pilot potential pH adjustments or metal precip options. The one thing that's changed since you guys rolled out this project is the grant funding opportunity in the state is much better than it was. Even though the state's been tightening its belt in the last 18 months or so, the grant opportunity is still there, especially for situations like this. And if you guys recall with your project, you could get a max grant of $8 million per project back in 2016 or 17, whenever that was. And then you were able to get some additional grant from USDA so to maximize that. Right now, the state allows up to 15 million grant per project. And for, I think something like this obviously would be high at their priority list. They're tightening the belt on priority. It's very competitive, but they're trying to target projects that are struggling meeting discharge requirements. So I just throw that out there that the grant funding opportunity is better now than it was when you guys rolled this out. And then, of course, depending on what happens, if you had to implement a project, that could be a possibility. So I know it's a lot, and we don't have all the answers, unfortunately, but we wanted to present this to you and then take any questions that you have and do the best we can to answer those.
It's unusual for consultants to go seek consultants. But I just got to think, this has happened before, someplace else. And making of a little case study with a lot of the data you've already gotten here, and finding the clearinghouse of data and approaches when you got this kind of situation, somebody already knows what to do. Our water's not, we don't have that unique a situation other than we had a tremendous drop in inflow and infiltration, which led to a bunch less water coming into our treatment plant. But somebody has had to have that happen and go, oh, well, yeah, what you guys need to do is, and because wastewater has got so many national groups and clearinghouses of information, somebody's got to know this.
Yeah.
Versus going to spend $6 to $10 million on chelation scenarios, which I don't, obviously not a clue as to what the path is.
Well, I think we'll take the grant if it covers the whole cost of that process, right?
Well, if but if they come back with, well, no, actually, this simple situation is here. He's right. You just have to put the pH up because your nitrification is sucking down the pH, which is also keeping the other stuff in making it insoluble. So, yeah, all you have to do is jump the pH up and voila, problem solved. Or some other relatively reasonable fix, but it's in a database that's outside of PACE.
Yeah, I think that is certainly possible, Jeffrey, and a good idea, but you guys are unique up here. The metal standards are fairly unique to California, and the regional board considers you guys as a discharger to the head of one of the premier blue ribbon trout streams in California and the western United States, that you have very low discharge requirements for metals. To give you an example, Dunsmuir, a little further south, they have double the limits that you guys do. And one of the reasons is the river's larger down there, so there's more dilution. But they can get there and stay below their limits just relying on the biological treatment to remove the insoluble fraction. We're working with City Shasta Lake. They have a discharge to Churn Creek. They're struggling. They just finished a $20-something million project and struggling with zinc, and they're looking at all options. Cottonwood, as I said, they have higher limits too. It has to do with the chemistry, the background alkalinity in the receiving water. There's a lot of factors, and the regional board, they consider the worst of the worst case. I mean, they consider the cases that can actually occur. So in other words, they assume that you're going to discharge your absolute highest wastewater into the river when the river is at its absolute lowest flow, which doesn't correlate. When you have high flows, the river's rushing, right? And we have data to support that those never line up, but they still nevertheless look at those extreme. So you're a bit unique. But I hear you, and I appreciate, we'll talk to anybody, we'll work with anybody to try to figure this out. And with Shasta Lake, we were working with Jacobs Engineering, who bought CH2M Hill, who's an international consulting firm, and they have PhDs growing on trees. So we have access to smart people. The idea is to figure out what's going to be best for you guys, and not hopefully a $6 to $10 million metal chelation process. Maybe it's a pH adjustment or alkalinity add at the front of the plant. But those have to be vetted, through pilot testing or whatever to figure it out. So your point's well taken.
So in general, Paul, this plant project had goals, and one of the goals in simple terms was to meet state regulations regarding wastewater discharge. With the exception of zinc, would you say the plant has met its goals regarding all the other items that need to be removed?
Yeah, it's performing really well.
Okay.
The nitrogen removal is great. Ammonia is almost non-existent. Copper is great. The UV system, filtration system, everything's working great. It's just zinc just kind of came out of left field.
Okay, so I'm going to hold you to it. The one problem is zinc, because there are people in this community that care about these things.
Sure.
And if it's more than zinc, they're going to let us know, but I'm not quite sure how they get that information, short of us publishing the lab results or something. But that is public information. If they want it, they can get it, I assume. So in general, biggest project in Mount Shasta history, public works-wise.
Yeah.
I don't think anything's come close. The combination of the sewage treatment plant and the interceptor project definitely is the $30 million range.
Right.
So big projects. It looks like without a doubt, the interceptor line is meeting its goal of cutting down on infiltration of the swamp water there, the marshlands. So that has led to the drop in sewage water going there, sanitary water going there, and it may be creating problems. So all right, so zinc is a problem, nothing else, right?
Yeah, that's all we know of right now. Everything else is looking good.
As planned.
Yes.
Okay, great. So then it comes down to, the cheapest solution would be for the State Water Resources Board to really take a look at our situation in detail. We don't send any gray water to the river for about half the year because we send it to the Mount Shasta Resort. About half the year? Yeah. And we don't send any to the river?
Not during that time.
No, okay. And then in the time that we do, the water flow is higher, as you said. So is there any hope that they'll look at the actual total quantity of zinc being put into the river versus the amount of water going down and analyze and go, well, averaged out for the whole year, the amount of zinc that's going into the river is below the target, averaged out because they don't put any gray water in the river for half the year. Is that a possibility, or is that just not going to fly?
Grant asked that very question last week.
All right. And what did they say?
Unfortunately, we have working with a regulator that's very challenging and kind of poo-pooed the idea. But it makes perfect sense.
Right.
We're not, and I wanted to remind them that when we started the project, we hired a fish and wildlife biologist to evaluate the health of the river, both upstream and downstream of the diffuser. And the results of their analysis were that the river was healthier downstream of the city's diffuser than it was upstream.
Who was this group? Do you remember?
It was a retired fish and wildlife biologist. And further, he said that the problem with the upper Sacramento River is the artificial warming caused by the presence of Lake Siskiyou.
Oh, yeah.
So in other words, the city's discharge, even with your old plant, was having no negative impacts. And they're looking at, macroinvertebrate populations, insects, stoneflies, caddisflies, that sort of thing. And it was more robust downstream. So, yeah, you would think an argument could be made that we're putting the same mass of zinc into the river.
On average, well,
over the year. It's the same mass, it's just coming in at a different rate kind of thing. So
that does look like,
it does, I mean, we're not done fighting the fight, obviously.
okay,
And
that would be the least expensive solution, just get a regulatory adjustment that makes sense for us.
yeah,
That's a sub 50% chance, it sounds like.
yeah, but there's more to it too, John, there's other things that the regional board's gonna look at for us. You know, you may recall we did a mixing zone dilution study down there where we put rhodamine dye in and we measured the concentration across transects in the river, and they gave us dilution credits associated with how that mixed.
Okay.
And so they're going to look at that and see if there's any room for, you know, increasing the dilution credits, et cetera. So they're supposedly going to take kind of a broad look at how they came up with the metals discharge requirements and see if they can provide any relief there. So that's good.
So that's ongoing.
That's ongoing.
And then other
And so-
solutions are mainly the alkaline?
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be looked at, you know, the pH adjustment, you know, I think a metal chelation or a metals precipitation process is an absolute last resort. Because it's not just the capital cost, it's the ongoing, you're gonna buy chemical by the truckload. You know, acids and bases to increase and decrease pH.
And that would be factored into rates for sure, even if
It would have to be,
even
yeah.
if we got the grant for, we received the grant for the capital cost totally, we'd have that
Yeah.
rather large chemical ticket to pay, and that would be on the ratepayers.
Right. You know, like I say, when the metals regulations came out in 2007, that was the first time they hit NPDES permits in California. And you guys were right in line, you know, first in line. And so since then, all of the dischargers that have been subject to those regulations, now all their plants have been improved and constructed and online, and they're all struggling with the same thing.
So where do we go from here? You're going to continue working with the Water Resources Board and experimenting with processes other than chelation?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, my main concern was that we didn't build a plant that wasn't having any effect. The point is the plant is having all its intended effects, with the exception of one thing.
Yeah, and you know, the plant, you look at the total cost, it's like 25, 26 million. I would say that 70% of that cost, roughly, was tied to removing nitrogen. That's the expense that it took to remove nitrogen. And that's a big deal.
And
So,
that's-
that's working great.
That's all mandatory required
Yep.
processes.
Ammonia, you know,
Yep.
is the nitrogen compound, and I think they have a nitrate limit now, Grant? Yeah, I think they added a nitrate limit too, so it's both.
And we're covered on all that,
Yeah,
correct? Okay.
yeah, that's been working good.
And with the fact that our flow is so low now compared to where it was, the plant can handle, if we have any kind of growth, where the flow of water from these houses goes up, it's certainly going to be way less than what you planned for.
Right.
So that's a big difference the interceptor line makes. Well, thank you for coming in. More questions before we go? No? All right.
Yeah.
Todd?
Yep. Any feasible way at looking at increasing dilution?
Increasing what, Tom?
Dilution?
Well, I kind of
I know you don't wanna-
facetiously threw this by the regional board in our meeting, and I said, well, you know, we could go back to Spring Street and just knock a hole in that pipe that we just plugged, bring that dilution water back in, and that might solve the problem. Of course, they didn't like that idea. But you talk about a cheap solution.
Yep. I immediately thought of that too, way back weeks ago when this came up. I said, well, because Todd mentioned a bit about the low flow, and I said,
Yeah.
well, just add water then.
Solution to pollution is dilution, right? I mean,
But you
that's-
already got that idea poo-pooed by the regulators. Great. All the simple solutions are
Off the table.
what? It's not good. What? They don't like them. Oh well. Anyhow, thanks for coming in. You've taken a big weight off of my shoulders, and I am happy that clarity has been brought to at least this panel. Hopefully people thought out there in the community and understand that we are going to make every effort to make this plant
Absolutely. Yeah. We're not going anywhere. We're on.
to meet standards.
Yeah. We're going to figure it out.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for your time,
Yeah,
gentlemen.
thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks, Paul.
Have a good holidays.
All right, with that said, the item number 4 is up, and that's public comment. Feel free to come up to the mic and speak about any subject not on the agenda, and not that it's particularly exciting, but anything within the consent agenda. You'll have 3 minutes approximately. I usually start the clock late, so it usually goes over. And we have a taker. So name and city of residence.
Good evening. My name is Chris Carr. I'm a local resident here in Mount Shasta as well as a local business owner. My wife and I own and operate an outfitter guide service here based in Mount Shasta. I've lived here this will be my 30th winter coming up. We're starting. And my purpose tonight, my comments are addressed regarding the snow removal of the Everett Memorial Highway and Castle Lake roads. This is something that I moved here originally, and I know many of us did, giving us access to Mount Shasta and our surrounding public lands. I've personally noticed in the last, probably 5 to 7 years, a regular and continued closure of the Everett Memorial Highway and restricting access both to us as locals, but also to us as business owners. And our business directly is affected by that road being opened or closed. Currently, the road's been closed since Thanksgiving storm approximately. I've been having customers and guests wanting to book and schedule trips with us for the past several weeks. I just got a text as this meeting was progressing, a guest who wants to come up this weekend. When that road is closed, we are not able to operate, our guides are not able to work, and there's a tremendous trickle-down effect. Our customers are often out of the area visitors. They're coming, they're spending money in our hotels and restaurants and grocery stores, our bars and restaurants, like I said. So, as well as just the fact we choose to live here locally, giving us access to those roads. So, if recreation weren't enough of a reason, there's certainly a financial desire too. So I just want to express support in coming up with better solutions for snow removal. I understand it's a county road. County is responsible for the snow removal. It's a county road that travels primarily through Forest Service land, access through a public municipality, our city. So I want to start thinking about other ways that we can support our county. None of our agencies are flush with money right now, I understand that. There's been a lot of effort on the public side through our business and SORA and other organizations. The public is willing, the public is ready for a pay-to-play structure. There are other examples, Oregon most notably with their snow permit system where you pay either a weekend or a daily or an annual fee. And I would just want to show support and how can we develop a program that can collect on that public support and give us better access and more reliable access to our public lands. So it's extremely valuable to us both personally and professionally, and I know I can speak for a lot of other businesses and other individuals in this town as well. And I just want to express that to you all to understand the importance of that road access. It's more than just recreational for many people. Our livelihoods depend on it. We know that Siskiyou County, Mount Shasta is difficult as small business owners. We are a very seasonal business, so any opportunities we can to generate revenue is a big advantage to us. So when we're turning away business every day, every week, it's difficult. And when our guides aren't working in these shoulder seasons, it's difficult for them too. So I just want to express that and thank you for your time and consideration.
So before you go, just out of curiosity, how far up are they plowing on Everett Memorial?
So at approximately mile 4 at McBride
Yeah.
Springs, there's a gate there.
Yeah.
So that the road is plowed to McBride Springs.
But
That's
not Bunny Flats.
not to Bunny Flat. Yep.
Well, that's a change.
And that has been a very consistent closure for the last couple of years after, typically obviously it happens after these large storms that we're experiencing, but as I said, this is my 30th year here, and I don't remember this happening before. We've certainly had big storms in the past and the road would close for periods of time, but weeks and sometimes months at a time is what we're experiencing the last several years. So I would like to come up with better alternatives or solutions that we can have a better consistent access.
Oh, thank you. You want to say anything? No. Yeah, it is a county problem, but the city benefits from having those roads plowed. So that's something if we had the surplus funding sitting around to work with the county to improve that.
I was going to say, do we have any options with the county to get them off their ass and do something? Or?
I don't know. So I will share this, and, I don't know the county's situation with their plows. But when we were pitching the EIFD to the county, a couple of supervisors, their opening salvo was, why doesn't the city take back Everett Memorial Highway and plow it? And I suspect, I may be off base, but they may be trying to put pressure on the city to take this over, which we can't afford. We can attempt to get the county to pay more attention to this, but I don't know what leverage we have other than if we ended up
Can we remind them that they're very wanting to bring more tourists to the area and that the mountain does that? Can we remind our supervisor of this?
But the prevailing wisdom of the county towards Mount Shasta, or the view. So I can make that attempt. We might want to, as a group, see if there's a way that we'd want to make a more unified approach. But it may end up, I know they don't have a lot of money either, but it's potentially, if we have to end up in a legal situation, we might have to go there.
Yeah, I haven't done it.
Not trying to put either of you on the spot here at the moment because it's not on the agenda. But is there a scale of cost involved when you say the county wants us to plow from McBride Springs up to Bunny Flat during the course of a year or a winter? Do we have any idea financially how big a nut is that?
Well, we don't have the equipment.
Right, yeah. Right now, it's impossible. We do not have the equipment. We cannot afford the equipment.
They use those augers, those 8-foot tall augers.
The
not
rotary
just
plow,
plows.
you would need a rotary plow.
So the part of this gentleman's question is also looking for different ways to approach this. Is it a labor issue, meaning if we used their equipment with our labor, is there some solution or shared cost scenario where it isn't a function of equipment, they've got it, but they don't want to spend all the, because that's a sunk cost. They got to maintain it, but that's a sunk cost. They've already got the equipment. It's paying the people to go operate the equipment, and maybe there's an arena there. I don't know.
Talk with Chris.
It's not in our budget to even pay the people to operate, to open that up.
Well, doesn't that open up an insurance Pandora's box? Like if we break their stuff with our staff?
That as well. I don't want to start whining, but we just sent our loader down to Reading to get the rear end replaced. We're looking at $20,000 minimum there. We just sent the plow down to get the engine rebuilt because the cylinder went out. We haven't even got a price on that yet. Our equipment certainly, we don't have the right equipment. Our equipment is old. Now, looking at the county, it's not just Everett Memorial. It's Castle Lake Road. They're locking the gates sooner. They're opening them later. it's their budget. They're hurting probably on the same scale we are as far as, I know their rotary plow was down for well over a year.
Yeah.
And it's held together with baling wire and chewing gum. I mean, you can tell when their rotary plow's gone by because the oil slick left on the road.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to cut this off as it's not an agenda item, and we went way beyond the 3 minutes. But obviously, there's interest in this item.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Anyone else in the audience would like to speak to a non-agenda item? Peggy, I'm thinking of you. No? You're good? Okay. All right, so we'll close public comment at this time and move on to staff and council comments. So, Todd, go ahead.
Okay. At our last city council meeting, we approved the purchase of 2 unpaid parcels on North Chestnut Street for $80,000. We're working on getting an estimate for getting that title report done, but I just wanted to see if there's any interest in agendizing the idea of getting a commercial appraisal, which shouldn't cost much because all the work is done, for what that property, if it was appraised just as used as a parking lot, and then initiate condemnation procedures where the courts could then use, let's just pick a number out of the air, say it's worth $40,000 to be used as a parking lot, where that's the cap that the judge then would negotiate from, and in terms of what we would compensate the owner for. And the reason it's still sort of sticking in my craw. And again, if council wants to go ahead with paying that $80,000, we'll do that. But it just seems that there may be a cheaper alternative to, anyway, I'll leave it in your hands. Let me know if you guys want to agendize that.
At the end of the meeting, yeah. At the end of the meeting?
Yep.
Future
Yes.
agenda?
Okay, and so on to the old hospital. As I've said before, we have the judgment from the property owner for failing to secure the site, and we want to move towards cleaning that up. There has been a hitch. The attorney for Bay Area Receivership Group has suffered some sort of debilitating illness. They have to transfer, go through a process to transfer attorneys from that agency to then take this on. They're working expeditiously on making that happen. In the meantime, through an RFP process, we have a company called Park Environmental Incorporated that's ready to start doing the work. We're just waiting to have that legal maneuver on Barge's part taken care of. So just if you're, I thought we would be underway by now, but we aren't. We need to get this piece taken care of. Next council meeting, to get us rolling on the landing, I'll be bringing a resolution and a staff report asking that council declares the property as surplus, which then allows us to start the Surplus Land Act and put it in HCD's hands in terms of putting out for a bid for qualified vendors to build affordable housing based on the programming we provide them. And that's it offhand.
Thank you, Todd. Any questions? No. And Ken, anything Public Works you'd like to tell us about? Kind of gave us a rundown on equipment problems. Thank you. It's good to know what's what's being fixed.
Nothing on zinc? Just kidding. Just kidding.
How about Melissa? Do you have anything to say at this point? You're good? All right. Jeff? Nope. All right. I'm going to give an outside meeting commentary right now, so we don't have to have it. Tessa, are you still there?
Still here, can you hear me?
Do you have any comments? I forgot that you're here.
The only thing, I was trying to talk during Chris's public comment is that why don't we invite Ed Valenzuela to one of our meetings and just start that conversation?
Sounds like a good idea. We'll make that a future agenda item, I guess.
I didn't quite catch that.
Why not? Tessa's suggesting that it might behoove us to invite Ed Valenzuela to a city council meeting to discuss this particular item and maybe others. I'll editorialize that way. But we'll formalize that as an agenda item at the end of the day, at the end of the meeting. Okay? All right. So that's all you got, Tessa?
Yeah.
Okay, so with respect to the Collier Interpretive and Information Center, due to some, I'm not quite positive what the reasons are, but the Discover Siskiyou group that is run through the Siskiyou Development Council, Economic Development Council, has cut their donation to the Interpretive Center by half, so from $5,000 to $2,500. And the city of Wairika has cut their donation in half also, if not more, from I believe it was $7,000 down to $3,500 or less. So that particular agency is in a bit of fiscal trouble. Since I'm on the board, has a balance of a little over $2,000 cash on hand, and has one employee that works part-time. But, and it just looks like the donations will not be able to cover expenses because there have been dramatic increases in insurance requirements by Caltrans, increasing the premium like threefold from $5,000 for the year to $15,000, something dramatic. So the agency is in dire straits. The hope is that someone like particularly the Siskiyou Economic Development Council will step in as a third party to manage the center and through their marketing prowess figure out a way to save it. Otherwise, we're probably going to have to vote for closure. So that's where we were at the last meeting. I don't exaggerate. That is what was talked about. Certainly the one employee may have to go, but they can't find volunteers to run it, so the place will effectively be closed if they drop that one person from the payroll. So we'll see what comes of the discussions with the Economic Development Council in Wairika. But that's my report on that meeting. Not a good one. Anyhow, we move on to committee updates if there are any, Todd.
None. DEAC meets next week.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the consent agenda. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes for the November 25th, 2024 regular meeting. Everyone attended. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable, November 25th, 2024, total gross payroll and taxes for period ending November 24th, 2024. C, approval of 2025 meeting schedule for council, commission, and committees, and city council pre-agenda meeting schedule. And D, police department monthly report for November 2024.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through D by title only.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And I think I heard Tessa, and aye. Any opposed? All right, so that's a 4-0-1 vote. And we move on to approval of canvass of election results. I don't know if Kathy is here to give this report. She is? All right, Kathy, you have the floor. We're working on it. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. On December 3rd, the registrar of voters certified the results of the general election. This item is before you this evening as a routine matter for council to approve the canvass of election results prior to swearing in the newly elected council members. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, but again, this is just a routine resolution.
We'll go through the standard procedure. Is there any clarifying questions for council? No. Kathy, we're going to go to public comment. I think we have to regardless. So public comment on the election results? No, no, no. So we are going to close public comment. The audience is not interested in commenting. Back to council. John, any thoughts? Thoughts? So Kathy, at this point, we simply need a motion and a second and vote.
What's the resolution number?
It's 34.
34? Okay. So motion to approve resolution CCR-24-34 by title only.
Mr. Collins, can you help with the second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 There we go.
Aye. Thank you, Tessa. Any opposed? So that is a 4-0-1 vote also. And then we now move on to the swearing in of new city council members. So Tessa is online, so she can get that out of the way with us attending. So again, Kathy, you have the floor for this.
Actually, John Kennedy, Senior City Clerk, should be present to administer the oath. Is he there?
He is.
Okay, so he should be able to swear in all of the council members if the two that are present will take position at the podium.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yep.
Raise your right hand. I state your name.
John Saxon.
Do solemnly affirm that I support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
That I will well and faithfully discharge the duties on
Which I'm about to enter.
which I'm about to enter.
That's it. Congratulations. Okay, take care.
All right, so I'm trusting that Tessa was involved with that. Tessa?
I didn't repeat anything, though.
Well, all right, that's being honest. I'll leave it to...
Do we have to do a separate
So
one
will
then
she
right
have
now
to-
real quick, or?
Will she have to do one at the City Hall separately then?
No, let's go ahead and get her sweared in this evening. Sworn in.
All right, so,
Here, come talk to the TV screen with her.
yeah. Sorry, John.
Okay, if John is still there, yes.
He is, Kathy.
I don't know where you are.
Great, thank you.
So can we get Tessa mic'd properly and...
Can we go ahead and do this?
Hold on, Tessa, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, get ready.
Hi, Tessa.
Hi.
I state your name.
I, Tessa Clore,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution to the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. All right, well, we're all sworn in, and we have our new panel for the next 2 years. And now it's time to pick the leadership of the council, and Kathy Joyce, our Deputy City Clerk, will start the process.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Each year, the council selects a member to serve as mayor and a member to serve as mayor and a member to serve as mayor pro tem for the following year. For tonight's process, I will open the floor for nominations for the position of mayor. Once all nominations have been made, a vote will be taken to close the floor. I will then take a roll call vote for each council member nominated in the order that the nominations were received. Once one council member has received a majority of votes, he or she will be deemed as elected as the mayor, and there will be no further votes. Once the mayor is seated, the meeting will be turned over to him or her to preside over the vote for mayor pro tem and for the remainder of the meeting. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and we'll also need to take public comment before we open the floor for nominations.
Are you ready? Are we ready for our nominations?
Clarifying question, public comment, and then we'll go to nominations.
All right, clarifying questions? All right, and then public comment is opened and now closed as we have no one in the audience. So we will go to the next step.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and open the floor for nominations for the position of mayor.
Yeah?
Nominate John Redmond.
Are there any further nominations?
The question was, is there a second needed for a nomination? That's no, right?
No, there's no second needed.
All right, so we have one nomination. And any other nominations? Talking to Tessa? No? Okay.
No. Okay, great. Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the floor?
I'll move to close the floor regarding nominations.
Is there
Second.
a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's a 5-0 vote.
Okay, so we only have one nominee. We'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Councilmember Redmond?
Aye.
Councilmember Sackless?
Aye.
Councilmember Collins?
Aye.
Councilmember Blackman?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleur?
Aye.
Okay, congratulations, Mayor Redmond. I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Let's get our garlic steak.
I think we both fit in them. Okay. So now, moving on to the selection of Mayor Pro Tem. We will turn that over to, now what are we going to do? Just take nomination and then go to public comment on the Mayor Pro Tem?
Just open the floor for nominations. You don't have to go to public
Okay.
comment again.
Okay, we will open the floor for nominations. I will nominate Jeffrey Collins as Mayor Pro Tem.
And I will nominate Tessa Clore as Mayor Pro Tem.
Any other nominations? No? Just the two, Kathy?
Okay. Is there a motion to close the floor?
Yes, I will make the motion to close the floor. Second?
Second?
A second.
Okay, Jeffrey seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. The first person nominated was Councilmember Collins. So this will be a vote to approve Councilmember Collins as Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Stackless.
Nay.
Councilmember Redmond. Correction, Mayor Redmond.
Yes.
Councilmember Collins.
Boy, an option for me not to be mayor? That's enticing. But I'll vote yes.
Councilmember Glaudman.
Aye.
Councilmember Clerk.
Nay.
So there is a majority vote, so Mayor Pro Tem is Collins.
It's moving.
So Jeff is here. I am where Jeff is, I think. Since I have the most seniority. And you stay there, yeah. And then Tessa stays here, I think. Okay. Oh. That's of course.
Down there, yeah, down there.
Where am I going?
No, you're right here.
Right here. Yeah.
Okay, we've rearranged seats. Kathy, what's anything next with this?
You can move on to the next item.
We are done now? Okay, no problem. So we will close item number 10 and then move on to item number 11, the City Council approval of expenditure for City Council training budget for member Globman to attend training in Garden Grove in January of 2025. And Kathy, this is turned over to you again.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Redmond, members of council. A couple weeks ago, I was speaking with Councilmember Glaudman, and he expressed interest in attending the League of California Cities new mayor and council member training in Garden Grove in January of 2025. I spoke with the finance director, and she informed me that the city council training budget has just under $2,000, which should cover the cost of training, hotel, and travel. And I just recommend that council approve his attendance at the conference.
Okay. Any clarifying questions? None? Seeing none, we will open it up to the public for public comment, and we will close public comment as there is no public for the comment. And therefore, do I have a motion to approve Casey's trip?
I'll move to approve the requested funds for Councilmember Glaudman's attendance at the 2025 League of California Cities Mayor and Councilmember Academy.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 That's a 5-0 vote. Okay, and it is my understanding now that item number 12, the Chamber of Commerce, has been moved to January?
It's been tabled to the first meeting in
Okay,
January at
sounds
the
good.
request of council, or chamber.
Seeing as that is not a thing, we'll move on to number 13, reports on outside meetings. But you just did your part, John. Anybody else got some outside meetings? Anything? Bueller? Nobody? Okay. We will close that and move on to 14, future agenda items. We wanted to get Ed Valenzuela here about plowing, correct? And then what was the one with the parcels again?
The condemnation.
Condemnation,
Okay. Yeah, let's get that done, please. Is that something on the first meeting in January, or
Yes.
just same as well? Okay.
and as well as the snow removal ordinance, we've got that back from John Kenny.
I'm sorry?
The snow removal ordinance, the new one,
Oh,
that's John
sweet,
Kenny,
okay.
it'll be back.
Cool, all right. Well, then that is it. I will make the motion to adjourn, and You want a second, I can tell.
I'm going to second that.
Right. All right. Well, on that note, we will see you all again on January 13th. Everybody have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Festivus for the rest of us.
Thank you, welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Have fun, Tessa.
25 is going to be a...